The year was 1989, and at the edge of the Arctic Circle, a monumental scientific endeavor was reaching its zenith. This was the Kola Super-Deep Borehole, a scar carved into the Earth's crust, not for oil or minerals, but for pure, unadulterated knowledge. Scientists from across the globe had converged in Russia, driven by an insatiable ambition to pierce the planet's mantle, to touch the very core of our world, and in doing so, push the boundaries of human understanding beyond anything previously imagined. The air buzzed with a mixture of hope and trepidation, a palpable excitement for the secrets that lay buried beneath kilometers of ancient rock. Among them was Dr. Aris Thorne, a geophysicist whose brilliance was matched only by his isolation. His eyes, often distant and haunted, carried the weight of a past failure, a professional disgrace that had stripped him of his reputation years ago. For Aris, Kola was more than a project. It was a crucible, his last chance at redemption. He harbored a controversial theory about the Earth's core, a radical idea dismissed by his peers, and he believed, with an almost religious fervor, that the borehole would provide the irrefutable evidence he craved. His single-minded pursuit often blinded him to the human element around him, a trait that both fueled his drive and alienated those closest. His team was a study in contrasts. Dr. Elena Petrova, a veteran geologist, possessed a sharp, analytical mind tempered by a healthy dose of skepticism. She admired Aris's intellect, but questioned his increasingly erratic methodology. Then there was Liam, a brilliant but naive young engineer, fresh out of university, whose youthful enthusiasm was infectious. Liam handled the intricate drilling machinery and the sensitive audio monitoring equipment, his curiosity a boundless well. From the outset, the project was plagued by challenges. Equipment failures were frequent, the extreme temperatures and pressures of the deep Earth testing the limits of human engineering. Each setback chipped away at morale, planting seeds of doubt among the crew. Aris, however, remained resolute, interpreting every obstacle as a mere test of their resolve. It was Liam who first detected them. Faint, almost imperceptible audio anomalies. Strange, rhythmic pulses emanating from kilometers below. He brought them to Aris, his young face etched with a mixture of wonder and concern. Aris, engrossed in geological data and focused solely on the physical composition of the rock, quickly dismissed them. Equipment malfunction, Liam. The sensors are pushed to their limits down there. Focus on the core samples, not phantom static. His tone, though not unkind, left no room for debate. Yet Elena, ever observant, began to notice inconsistencies in Aris's data interpretations, subtle omissions, and hurried conclusions that didn't quite align with her own readings. A growing unease settled in her gut, a feeling that something was being overlooked or perhaps deliberately ignored. Meanwhile, Liam, unable to shake the unsettling nature of the sounds, secretly began to record them, his curiosity overriding Aris's dismissive orders. He enhanced the audio, filtering out the drilling noise, isolating the faint rhythmic patterns. They were still indistinct, like whispers carried on a distant wind, but undeniably present. Then, one evening, as the drilling paused for maintenance and the control room hummed with a deceptive calm, the faint sounds grew clearer. They were no longer mere static. A rhythmic, almost deliberate pattern emerged, a subtle pulsation that seemed to resonate deep within the very structure of the Earth. Aris, oblivious, declared the project was on track, a triumphant glint in his eyes. He beamed, unaware that the true nature of their discovery was about to unravel everything they thought they knew. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The rhythmic, almost deliberate pattern echoing from the depths had become too insistent to ignore. Liam, a flicker of nervous energy in his eyes, finally found the courage to confront Aris. his voice barely a whisper against the hum of the drilling machinery. He held out a pair of headphones, his hand trembling slightly. "Dr. Thorne, you need to hear this. It's not equipment malfunction. I've isolated it." Eris, initially annoyed by the interruption, reluctantly took the headphones. As the unsettling vocalizations, now distinct, though still alien, filled his ears, a chilling recognition flickered across his face. His carefully constructed denial shattered. The sounds were not random. They were patterned, undeniably so. A primal fear, long suppressed, clawed its way to the surface, a phantom echo of a childhood trauma he had buried deep within his subconscious. Elena, observing Eris's sudden pallor, felt her scientific skepticism warring with the undeniable evidence now emanating from Liam's console. The sounds were unlike anything she had ever encountered in geological acoustics. They debated their origin with increasing urgency. Was it a geological phenomenon, an unheard-of resonance within the Earth's crust? Or perhaps, as Liam hesitantly suggested, a manifestation of the intense psychological stress of isolation playing tricks on their minds? Eris, however, clung to his own desperate need for validation. He saw not a threat, but a puzzle, a grand challenge. "We must investigate further," he declared, his voice regaining its authoritarian edge, though tinged with an unfamiliar desperation. "A deeper analysis of the audio is paramount." His insistence stemmed from a dark chapter in his past. Years ago, during a deep-sea exploration, he had reported anomalies, strange, almost melodic vibrations emanating from an unexplored trench. His colleagues had dismissed them as hallucinations, attributing them to pressure-induced psychosis. The ensuing scandal had cost him his reputation, his credibility, and nearly his career. The memory of that public humiliation, the accusations of madness, fueled his current obsession. He could not, would not, be wrong again. This time, he would prove them all wrong. As Eris immersed himself in the technical analysis, Elena's unease deepened. Driven by a nagging intuition, she began to sift through historical records, old geological surveys, and even local folklore pertaining to the Kola region. What she uncovered sent a shiver down her spine. There were scattered, often suppressed, accounts of unexplained phenomena near the borehole site, whispers of strange lights, peculiar atmospheric disturbances, and even faint, distant singing heard by isolated villagers decades ago. These records had been systematically dismissed, often classified as Soviet-era propaganda or mass hysteria, but Elena saw a disturbing pattern. It suggested that their discovery was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger, hidden narrative. The growing paranoia within the team was palpable. Isolated kilometers underground, the constant, unnerving presence of the unseen entity began to fray their nerves. Every creak of the machinery, every distant rumble was amplified, feeding their anxiety. Sleep became a luxury, plagued by unsettling dreams and the phantom echo of the borehole's whispers. Then came the revelation that shattered their remaining scientific paradigms. After countless hours of advanced spectral analysis, Liam, his face pale with a mixture of terror and awe, presented his findings. The patterns within the anomalous sounds were not random. They were intricate, complex, mimicking the sophisticated structures found in human speech, but in a language utterly unknown to any linguistic database. It implied not a geological anomaly, not psychological stress, but an intelligent origin, a conscious presence lurking in the unimaginable depths of the earth. The implications were staggering, terrifying, and undeniably real. The implications of an intelligent origin for the sounds reverberated through the small team, a chilling realization that transformed their scientific endeavor into something far more profound and terrifying. Driven by a desperate need to understand, to quantify, to control, Eris pushed them relentlessly. He saw the complex patterns, the subtle mathematical sequences embedded within the alien vocalizations, not as a threat, but as a code waiting to be cracked, a cosmic riddle that would finally validate his life's work. This was his chance for redemption, his opportunity to silence the ghosts of past failures. He ignored the deepening circles under Elena's eyes, the increasing jumpiness in Liam's movements, the palpable tension that permeated their underground sanctuary. Their deteriorating mental state was a secondary concern, easily overshadowed by the monumental discovery at their fingertips. Liam, initially fascinated by the intellectual challenge of deciphering the language, soon found himself consumed by it. The sounds, once merely an object of scientific curiosity, began to worm their way into his subconscious. He started experiencing vivid, disturbing dreams, not just fleeting images, but full sensory experiences, often accompanied by the unsettling vocalizations. He would wake in a cold sweat, the echoes of the borehole's whispers still ringing in his ears, leaving him disoriented and fearful. The line between dream and reality blurred, and the entity's influence subtly began to manifest in his waking hours, a quiet hum beneath the surface of his thoughts. Elena, however, grew increasingly alarmed. Her scientific rigor clashed violently with the ethical quagmire they were wading into. "Eris," she pleaded one evening, her voice strained with fatigue and worry, "we don't know what this is. We're blindly poking at something ancient, something beyond our comprehension. Have we considered the danger? The ethical implications of even trying to communicate with whatever this is?" Her words, however, fell on deaf ears. Eris hunched over his console, meticulously cross-referencing spectral data, merely waved a dismissive hand. "Knowledge, Elena, is never dangerous. Only ignorance." Their precarious situation was brutally underscored when a critical piece of drilling equipment malfunctioned deep within the borehole. A sudden, violent tremor shook the shaft, dislodging a massive rockfall that nearly trapped Liam in the depths. He scrambled back, his face ashen, the roar of collapsing rock echoing behind him. Eris, with a surprising burst of quick thinking and decisive action, managed to override the safety protocols, activating an emergency retraction system that pulled Liam to safety just moments before the shaft sealed itself. The incident, while averted, served as a stark reminder of the fragility of their existence, the razor-thin margin between life and death in the Earth's crushing embrace. Yet, even this near catastrophe failed to deter Eris from his singular pursuit. As the days bled into weeks, the sounds from the borehole began to exert a more insidious influence. A creeping irritability seeped into their interactions, small disagreements escalating into sharp, bitter exchanges. Paranoia flickered in their eyes. Every shadow seemed to hold a hidden threat. Every silence a pregnant pause before an unseen assault. The constant, subtle pressure of the entity's presence was subtly reshaping their minds, eroding their resilience. Then, Eris made a breakthrough. After countless hours, amidst a flurry of complex mathematical calculations and linguistic algorithms, a pattern emerged, a sequence that transcended mere sound. It was a message, deciphered from the heart of the earth. His hands trembled as he stared at the screen, the decoded symbols coalescing into a coherent, albeit cryptic revelation. Was it a warning, a plea, or an invitation to something far grander, far more terrifying than they could possibly imagine? The weight of the discovery pressed down on him, a mixture of triumph and profound dread. Unbeknownst to Eris, however, Elena had been conducting her own quiet investigation. The inconsistencies she had noted earlier, the hurried conclusions and suppressed readings, had nagged at her. Digging deeper into the project's financial records and geological reports, she uncovered a damning truth. Eris had been manipulating data, subtly altering readings, downplaying adverse conditions, all to secure continued funding for the project. He had intentionally suppressed evidence of structural instability and unusual energy fluctuations, risking their lives, all to continue his personal quest for redemption, his obsessive pursuit of the borehole's secrets. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Eris, her colleague, her leader, had betrayed them all. Elena's face, etched with a mixture of anger and profound disappointment, hardened as she confronted Eris. The sterile glow of the control room lights seemed to amplify the tension between them, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with their unspoken accusations. "You jeopardized us all, Eris," she articulated, her voice a low, dangerous growl, "for your own ambition. You manipulated the data, suppressed critical warnings. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Eris recoiled, his usual scientific detachment crumbling under the weight of her fury. His eyes, usually sharp and analytical, darted away, unable to meet her gaze. He mumbled incoherent excuses, a desperate attempt to justify his actions, but his words dissolved into the oppressive silence. The trust that had tenuously held their team together shattered, leaving an irreparable chasm. Liam, a silent observer to this raw display of betrayal, felt an icy dread creep into his heart. He was caught in the crossfire, torn between the mentor he had admired and the colleague whose integrity he respected. The revelation of Aris's deception left him feeling adrift, isolated in the crushing depths of the borehole. This emotional turmoil only amplified the unsettling allure of the sounds. They seemed to hum with a newfound intensity, a seductive whisper that promised understanding, a connection he now desperately craved in the wake of human fallibility. Indeed, the voices from the borehole intensified, escalating from subtle whispers to an insistent, almost personal chorus. Each team member heard them differently, tailored to their deepest fears and desires. For Eris, they were echoes of his past failures, a constant reminder of the lives lost in his previous endeavor, a relentless taunt that spurred his desperate need for control. He began to believe with a terrifying conviction that he could somehow appease this ancient entity, manipulate it, turn its power to his advantage, thereby achieving the redemption he so desperately craved. For Liam, the sounds became a siren song, a promise of profound knowledge, a beckoning towards a hidden truth that ordinary science could never offer. He began to spend hours alone, headphones clamped to his ears, listening intently, a trance-like absorption settling over him. Liam's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He spoke in cryptic phrases, his eyes wide and unfocused, muttering about understanding the source, of being chosen. He would trace intricate patterns on the condensation-streaked walls, patterns that vaguely resembled the decoded symbols Eris had found. Elena tried to reach him, to pull him back from the precipice, but he seemed to exist in a world only he could perceive, a world dominated by the entity's pervasive influence. Then, disaster struck. The structural integrity of the borehole, compromised by Eris's suppressed warnings and the constant, subtle vibrations of the entity, finally gave way. A violent tremor ripped through the facility, a deafening groan of tortured metal and rock. Lights flickered and died, plunging them into a terrifying darkness. When emergency power restored a dim, flickering illumination, they found a critical section of the shaft had collapsed, sealing off their primary escape route and severing most communication with the surface. The remaining connection was sporadic, barely a trickle of static-laden data. They were truly trapped, isolated, with the Earth itself conspiring against them. Elena, her heart pounding with a primal fear, knew they were in grave danger. She seized Liam, her grip firm, her voice urgent. "Liam, we have to go. We have to find another way out now." But he merely shook his head, his gaze distant. "No," he whispered, a strange, serene smile gracing his lips. "I can't leave. It wants me to stay. I understand now." He pulled away from her, drawn not to an escape route, but towards the deepest point of the facility, towards the source of the insidious sounds. Eris watched Liam's descent, a flicker of desperation in his eyes. The collapse, the severed communication, the growing influence on Liam, it all coalesced into a terrifying realization. He was losing control. Consumed by a desperate, reckless impulse, he stumbled towards the main console, his mind racing. He would not be defeated. He would not fail again. Against Elena's fervent, horrified warnings, Eris began to prepare a specialized probe, one designed for direct audio transmission. He intended to send it into the deepest, untouched part of the borehole to make direct contact, to finally confront the entity that had consumed their lives. He would face it, or he would die trying. The ultimate descent was about to begin. The whine of the probe's thrusters filled the control room, a stark counterpoint to the rising tension. Eris, his face a mask of grim determination, ignored Elena's frantic pleas, his fingers dancing across the controls. He launched the specialized probe, a slender metallic dart plummeting into the abyss, carrying their last hope, or perhaps their final doom. As it descended, a chilling silence fell upon the control room, broken only by the crackle of the audio feed. Then the sounds began. They were no longer distant whispers or cryptic patterns. The probe transmitted an unfiltered torrent of sound, terrifyingly clear, directly into their minds. It wasn't just noise. It was an overwhelming symphony of coherent thoughts, raw emotions, ancient memories, and alien perspectives. The entity communicated not through language, but through a direct assault on their senses, bypassing their ears and resonating deep within their consciousness. Visions flashed before their eyes, nebulae swirling in cosmic dances, primordial oceans teeming with life, the slow, inexorable grind of tectonic plates, and the cold, vast emptiness of space. The entity was ancient, impossibly so, a sentient consciousness woven into the very fabric of the earth, a silent witness to eons. Its purpose, now laid bare, was not hostile, but a profound, desperate plea for understanding, a lament for the fragile ephemerality of existence, a profound lesson about interconnectedness that humanity, in its arrogance, had failed to grasp. Eris, confronted with this raw, unfiltered truth, crumbled. The magnitude of his hubris, the sheer insignificance of his personal quest for redemption, crashed down upon him. He saw his ambition, his past failures, his manipulations, all through the entity's timeless gaze, and it was devastating. He stumbled back from the console, his hands flying to his head, a guttural cry escaping his lips as he convulsed, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the revelation. His mind, so meticulously ordered by scientific principles, shattered under the weight of such profound, alien knowledge. Meanwhile, Liam, who had been standing transfixed, a strange light in his eyes, now moved with a purpose born of absolute conviction. The entity's influence over him was complete. He was its conduit, its voice. "We cannot leave," he intoned, his voice eerily calm, yet not his own. "We must stay. We must listen. It is the only way." He began to move towards the emergency override panel, his intention terrifyingly clear: to seal their escape route, trapping them forever within the borehole's embrace, ensuring they would become permanent listeners to the entity's eternal song. Elena, despite the psychological assault of the entity's communication, felt a surge of adrenaline. Eris was broken. Liam was lost. She was the only one left. Her scientific skepticism, once a shield, now became her anchor. She fought against the insidious whispers in her mind, focusing on the immediate, tangible threat. Liam, moving with an unnatural swiftness, was mere feet from the panel. "Liam, no!" she cried, lunging forward. A desperate struggle ensued, a silent, brutal dance in the flickering shadows. Elena grappled with Liam, his strength amplified by the entity's influence, his eyes holding a chilling, distant serenity. Her hand shot out, trying to push him away from the controls, her mind screaming for a way out. The fate of their escape, indeed their very lives, hung precariously in the balance. Then, through the cacophony of the entity's thoughts and the desperate struggle, a flicker of clarity returned to Aris. He remembered the faces of the lost, the accusations, the crushing weight of his past failure. He saw Elena fighting, saw Liam's vacant eyes, and a profound, agonizing realization pierced through his shattered mind. This was not redemption. This was destruction. With a final, desperate surge of will, Aris stumbled towards a secondary control panel, one designed for emergency demolition charges. His knowledge, his profound understanding of the borehole's complex structure, which had once been his downfall, would now be his final act of atonement. He would not fail them again. He would not sacrifice them to his ambition or to this ancient, terrible truth. He would make a choice, a final, self-sacrificing act to create an exit, even if it meant sealing his own fate with the entity he had so recklessly sought. Elena, battered and bruised, dragged Liam, still disoriented but no longer actively resisting, through the crumbling access tunnel. The ground shuddered violently, the roar of collapsing rock echoing behind them like a hungry beast. Dust and debris rained down, stinging their eyes as they scrambled upwards, driven by a primal urge for survival. Aris's sacrifice, the controlled charges detonating deep below, had created a precarious path to freedom, a narrow window before the entire structure imploded. They emerged into the stark, biting wind of the Kola Peninsula, gasping for breath, the frigid air a shocking contrast to the suffocating depths they had just escaped. The world above was a scene of controlled chaos. Emergency personnel, initially bewildered by the sudden loss of contact, now swarmed the site, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and profound confusion. Elena, her body aching but her mind sharp, was immediately swept into a whirlwind of questions. Authorities, their faces grim, demanded explanations for the cataclysmic events. Her words, recounting an ancient, sentient entity communicating through sound, of a colleague's self-sacrifice, and of another's temporary possession, were met with a wall of skepticism, then thinly veiled concern for her mental state. She spoke of Aris Thorn, his ambition, his ultimate redemption, and the terrifying truth they had uncovered. She painted a vivid picture of the entity's overwhelming communication, its desperate plea for understanding, and the profound lesson about interconnectedness. Yet the official reports would simply state a catastrophic geological event, a tragic accident, and the loss of Dr. Aris Thorn. The Kola superdeep borehole, the site of humanity's deepest penetration into the earth, was sealed indefinitely. A monument not just to scientific ambition, but to humanity's profound limitations in the face of the truly unknown. Liam, meanwhile, remained largely silent, his eyes holding a distant, unfathomable quality. He was forever changed. The entity's whispers, though no longer an overwhelming assault, had settled into a persistent hum within him, a low thrum of alien knowledge that resonated in his very bones. He struggled with the lingering influence, the echoes of cosmic dances and primordial epics, the constant awareness of a consciousness far beyond human comprehension. He was a silent vessel carrying a fragment of the entity's truth, a living testament to the unfathomable depths they had plumbed. Elena, traumatized but resolute, refused to let the truth be buried. She dedicated her life to understanding the implications of their discovery, poring over Aris's salvaged notes, studying every anomaly, every spectral analysis. She honored Aris's sacrifice not with lamentations, but with relentless pursuit of knowledge, striving to bridge the chasm between human understanding and the entity's profound message. She became a quiet advocate for a different kind of science, one that acknowledged the limits of human perception and the vast unexplored territories of existence. The lingering question, a silent torment and a driving force, remained. Was the entity a threat A guide, or simply a reflection of humanity's deepest fears and boundless arrogance? Its nature remained ambiguous, a cosmic Rorschach test for those brave enough to consider it. Years later, the world had largely forgotten the Kola Superdeep incident, relegating it to obscure scientific journals and whispered conspiracy theories. Elena, now a respected, if somewhat eccentric, scholar, continued her work, her eyes still holding the depth of what she had witnessed. Liam, however, lived a life of quiet solitude. He had found solace in art, his hands moving with a fluid grace, sketching intricate patterns that seemed to flow from some unseen wellspring within him. These were not random designs. They were complex mathematical sequences, geometric forms that mirrored the very language of the entity, the patterns he had once tried to decode. In his art, the whispers found a silent voice, a subtle, unsettling hint that the connection forged in the depths of the earth was never truly broken. The final image shows Liam, his face serene, yet his eyes holding a profound, ancient wisdom as his pencil dances across the page, creating a tapestry of alien beauty, leaving the audience with an unsettling sense of wonder and profound dread.